It's coming up on a year now since I uploaded this video on my YouTube channel in which I said I was going to start making videos developing UEFN games. Since then, I've uploaded a total of 0 videos. Don't get me wrong, I still made quite a few games, but whenever it came to making a video about it, I'd always second guess myself and never got around to it. But hopefully that ends today, and if you're watching this video, that means I did go through with it, so way to go me. Anyways, to catch you up on what I've been working on the last year, here's a quick recap. The first project I worked on was a first-person Tilted Towers combat game. Then I made a first-person Pillars game. Next was an RPG knockout game. Then a baller soccer game, which I never released. Then I made Peace PvP, which is easily the most successful out of all of them. And lastly, a Fall Guys Capture the Flag game. All while continuing to add new features to Bullseye's already popular games. Fast forward to a couple weeks ago, and I decided it would be fun to make a game using the new Squid game tools and force myself to make a video on it no matter what. I started by creating a new project of the Squid Game Island template and had a peek at all of the tools available. Then I deleted everything so I could get to work. I decided I was going to make a snipers versus runners game, but to keep with the Squid Game theme, the snipers would be the guards and the runners would be the players. I started by creating a large empty room, then created the platform that the snipers would stand on. Next, I used the Squid Game gallery to build what would eventually be the runners area. I wanted it to be a pretty simple course, but also wanted to make sure I added things to hide behind. This is what it looked like when it was done, and I thought it looked pretty good. Now that I was mostly done with the actual map, it was time to work on the mechanics so you didn't just sit there and do nothing when you spawned in. I went ahead and made it so when the game started, it would split the players up into 2 teams and teleport them to the starting areas. That part seemed to work, and I made sure players were actually getting put on the right teams by sniping the test players. I did eventually realize the teleport system wasn't fully working because sometimes players would get left behind. The solution to that problem was just to give every player their own teleporter, which ended up being nicer anyways, so you're not all falling on top of each other. Now that the teleportation system was sorted, I had to make sure each team had a way to actually win the game. I added a trigger so that when a runner makes it to the end, the runners win, and a timer so that if the runners don't make it to the end, the snipers win. I also made it so that when a runner is sniped, they get teleported back to the start. With that last change, I pretty much had a fully functioning game. All that was left was to decorate the lobby and the UI. But then I got to thinking. Snipers vs. runners is fun for a while, but after a couple rounds, players are probably ready to try a new game, which means the playtime would be really bad. So I decided to make this into a full mini-game map with snipers vs. runners just being one of the many mini-games. Sticking with the Squid Games theme, the next mini-game I decided to make was the glass bridge. The coding for this one was actually pretty simple. I used the trick tile device and a bit of verse code to make it so each tile had a 50-50 chance of breaking when you stepped on it. If you fall, you just get teleported back to the beginning, but the fake glass respawns, so you have to remember which ones are fake and make it to the end before the timer runs out. I was able to copy and paste the teleport system for the beginning of the game, which made the process a whole lot quicker the second time around. Once I had the game working, I added more tiles to make it harder, and I was done. Now that I had 2 mini games, I set up a randomizer to pick one of them whenever the start of the game was triggered. Once that was set up, it was time to add more mini games. The next mini game I decided to add was jump rope. The core mechanics were going to be very similar to glass bridge. You have to make it to the end before the timer runs out, and if you fall, you get sent back to the beginning. The tricky part was modeling the actual jump rope. I don't really use the modeling tools that much, so it took a bit of trial and error, but I eventually got something that looked decent. Once I had the jump rope, I scripted it to rotate and added a volume around it to detect when players got hit. Then I used a movement modulator to launch them off to the side when that happened. That was basically all I had to do to get that minigame working, and it was time to get started on the next one. After finishing the jump rope minigame, I moved on to making a dodgeball using the DocG envelopes. I started by building a small arena and setting it up so when players spawned in, they'd automatically get the envelopes in their inventory. From there, I made it so that if you got hit, you wouldn't get eliminated right away, you would just get knocked. That way, teammates could revive you, but it came with a risk since they'd be wide open while trying to do it. To finish off, I added player counters to track when an entire team was knocked, and if that happened, the other team would win. Everything was working great until I ran into a weird issue. When players got knocked, I also made them invulnerable so they wouldn't be fully eliminated. But that somehow carried over to the sniper game too, so once you got knocked, you'd stay invulnerable forever. I ended up spending about an hour just tracking down and fixing that bug, but I eventually got it working. The idea for the next minigame came from when I was testing the template island. One of the highlighted devices was the carryable spawner device. After messing around with it for a while, I came up with the idea for a basketball minigame. The first thing I had to do was model the hoop. Once again, I'm not a modeler, but I eventually got a version that I was happy with. Once I had that, I made it move side to side so the game wasn't too easy. I realized the basketballs were just sitting on the ground after I threw them, so I added water that would destroy and respawn them back up top. I also set up a trigger to detect when a ball went through the hoop and an invisible wall to prevent it from going through the bottom. Once that was set up, I needed a way to show which player hit the most baskets and therefore won the minigame. So I spent almost a full day writing code for a leaderboard, and this is what it looked like in the end. When I finally got to testing it, I realized there was a huge problem. Although the trigger could tell when it was scored on, it couldn't tell who threw the ball, which meant everyone was ending the game with a score of 0. I was pretty close to deleting the whole thing, but then I realized I could make it into a team game with 2 different baskets. I created a heads-up display to show each team's score, and this is what it looked like when it was all done. Obviously, the players aren't going to be able to fly around, but you get the point. With that done, it was time to move on to the next minigame, and I decided it was going to be a Boulder dodge game. The first thing I did was build the arena, which immediately broke the second I tested it. Turns out the walls and ramp were taking damage from the boulders, so I had to make sure they were indestructible. Once that was fixed, it actually worked. I did notice the boulders would just stack at the end though, so I added a lava pit at the back so the boulders would fall through. Then I played with the settings so that the boulders all wouldn't spawn at the same time. I made it so for the first 30 seconds they would fall pretty slowly, but after that it would ramp up in difficulty. Then I made it so if you get hit, you get knocked, just like the dodgeball minigame. All players that were alive at the end of 60 seconds would win the minigame. With that finished, I had another minigame fully ready to go. And that's where I wrapped up things for now. I'm gonna add a whole bunch of minigames before releasing the map, but those will have to wait for another video, so be sure to subscribe. And if you have an idea for a minigame, let me know in the comments.